Okay.
Preparing to live stream. Still preparing.
I forgot that there was this delay. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are live.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this meeting of the Environment Subcommittee. So we have three bills on our agenda. House Bill 1, which we heard today, and we've heard, this is, what we've passed for a number of years. House Bill 130 and House Bill 245. I just want to say at the outset, we'll discuss House Bill 130 and 245. We won't take any action on either of them. But with that, House Bill 1, Maryland Paint Stewardship. Again, we heard the bill today. We've approved it for. Oh, and
Yeah, I got him.
Okay.
Will you take a motion on that?
Yeah, that's what I want,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Move
Yes.
the bill.
Approval.
Second.
Okay. Delga Love has moved it. Delga Taras, are you seconding it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just in the interest of complete fairness, I will say, are there any questions about this bill? Okay. If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Bill passes unanimously. Thank you. Should all of our bills be that straightforward, right?
Right.
Well, we've only passed it about 10 times.
That's true. That's true. Okay. House Bill 130, Department of General Services. Kristen, if you could summarize what this bill does, and then I see Lisa, you are here, right? So if you want to add anything to the discussion, feel free. And again, we're not going to, we just wanted to discuss it today. So after Kristen and Lisa have spoken, if there's any particular provision that folks would like, say, I'm not quite sure about this, what this means, like some more explanation, feel free to pipe in and say that. So with that, Kristen.
Okay. So broadly, the bill is codifying existing policy. It implements provisions of the governor's executive order requiring the state to reduce energy consumption in state-owned buildings by 20% by 2031, compared with the fiscal 2018 baseline. And it also it's repealing a prior year executive order. So what this means is there was an order in place requiring the state to reduce energy consumption in state buildings by 10% by 2029. This is changing it to by 20% by 2031.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just looking at the fiscal note, which lists on back of page 2 the requirements under the executive order that are being incorporated. It's mirroring the requirements of the executive order, including requiring the Maryland Green Building Council to update the high performance green building program to ensure that all new buildings and major renovations align with the state's goal to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. DGS must identify candidates for energy savings performance contracts at state-owned facilities, and agencies must provide on-site support to DGS. Annually, DGS must analyze all state-owned buildings to identify the buildings with the highest energy use per square foot and the greatest greenhouse gas emissions. Again, on an annual basis, DGS must conduct an energy and greenhouse gas emission audit of at least 2 million square feet of state-owned buildings. The audits must include best practices and identify low-cost measures for increasing energy efficiency and reducing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. State agencies that receive energy audits must implement the identified measures to the fullest extent practicable. For 1 year following implementation, DGS must monitor each agency's energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, track changes resulting from the measures, and calculate any energy cost savings. Reductions in energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions resulting from energy saving initiatives must be recorded in a comprehensive utility records management database. Each unit of state government must on a monthly basis or by request, provide DGS with access to available data about its facility and copies of the unit's utility bills. DGS must gather the data and information necessary to fully populate, update, and maintain the database. All units of state government must, in support of their core missions, implement projects and initiatives to conserve energy and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and provisions promoting the state's energy efficiency emission goals must be included in requests for proposals for spaces to be leased to the state that would obligate the state to pay utility bills for those leased spaces. And then there's associated reporting requirements for DGS also included in the bill.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. I see Delegate Ruth, Delegate Love, and Delegate Foley, you have hands up, but before I recognize you, just want to ask Lisa Nisley with the department if there's anything you wanted to add to Kristen's review of the bill.
Oh, I think she did a great job summing it up. I do have David St. Jean with us as well from DGS, and if you have any questions, we're happy to answer. We think this is a great way for the state to lead by example. It's in line with the CSNA, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Okay, questions. First goes to Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just generally, I like this bill. I think it's great. I think it's really important for the state to lead by example. My question is it, and I guess it is, but is 20% sufficient to get us to those climate goals? Did that number come out of the climate plan, or how did we determine 20% is sufficient?
I'm going to turn to David to answer that. He's been involved since the get-go.
Hello, everyone. Happy to answer that question. It's an achievable goal, I think, partially is how we arrived at that. It's a goal that we should be able to do without requiring a lot of additional funds or staff. If we're looking to get much above 20% savings, it's going to require funding over the next several years. We thought that this was a great way to motivate state agencies to sort of keep their eye on the ball. So to continue to try to save energy as they repair their buildings and put up new ones.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Delegate Ruth, if you don't, I can add to that a little bit since I was very much involved with the Climate Solutions Now Act. This 20% reduction by 2031 is consistent with the goal for large private sector buildings as well. So, yeah. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can someone explain to me in the fiscal note when it talks about the state effect as the bill codifies an existing executive order, any financial costs are attributed to the executive order, not the bill. I'm not sure what that means.
That the costs would be incurred without the bill as well, because this policy is already being it's already being implemented or going to be implemented.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the fiscal note writer is just not going to make it attribute it to this bill.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be, and I think that David mentioned this just in passing in his comments a couple of minutes ago, but I just want to be clear that this does cover new buildings, so that new buildings, how does it affect, let me put it this way, what if any effect does it have on new buildings that are being constructed or yet to be constructed? Does this bill have any effect on those projects?
Yes, that's a good question. So the 20% savings goal is basically statewide, and it does not specifically talk about existing buildings or new buildings. However, the part of this that does address new buildings is where we ask the Green Building Council to update the High Performance Green Building Program, which does address all new buildings and does address systemic renovations in existing buildings. And we think that that could be better aligned with economy-wide net zero by 2045 state's goals. It currently points towards LEED Silver as a compliance path, which is what most new buildings adopt as their compliance pathway. And that's a far cry from net zero. So we'd like to see that program updated to reflect the state's climate goals.
Okay, so if I could, Mr. Chair, follow up. So if I understand you, David, what you're saying is that this bill does address new buildings, but we could do more in that area. Do I have that right?
We could do more than what we're currently doing. And so what we're asking is that the high performance green building program be updated to achieve the state's goals. And
Okay,
once
so-
that is done, then all new buildings and major renovations will fall in line with the state's goals.
Oh, okay. So if those revisions are done, then it will,
Correct. And
then we
that-
will be able to get there with the new buildings. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? David and Lisa, I do have one question. Could you talk about buildings that are leased by the state but not owned? I know there's the provision, page 5, which says that when I guess they're new leases that are, new requests for proposals for leases that provisions promoting these emission reduction goals should be included in the RFPs. But I guess with respect to current buildings not owned but substantially leased by the state, this bill doesn't have any impact on those, does it?
I suppose not specifically. There are standards in all lease documents now through DGS Real Estate for energy efficiency at buildings that are being leased by the state. And they're pretty good. They're pretty stringent. It was explained to me through the Office of Real Estate that if you're looking at the city of Baltimore and sort of central Maryland, we can find buildings that comply with our energy efficiency standards. If we get too far outside of central Maryland, it's more difficult to find building stock that can fulfill these requirements. So they didn't want to tighten it up to make it too mandatory, I guess, but the requirements are in there to be evaluated in proposals sent in to the real estate office when they're looking to lease spaces.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, or is there any part of this bill that any subcommittee member would like more information on? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks to our friends at DGS, and we'll move on to our next bill then, which is
Thank you.
House Bill 245. I guess it's fair to say if there ever was an omnibus fee bill, this is it. It is, quite extensive, dealing with fees for a number of different programs. So I will say that if you have access to the fiscal note, there is starting on page 2, there's a good summary of all the provisions in the bill. So as the summary says, I mean, it covers everything from fees and regulatory framework for dams to on-site septic systems, well construction. I mean, I really shouldn't try to read most of the list because it is quite extensive. Sediment control plans, increases the per barrel oil transfer fee that's already on the books, fees under the Wetlands and Waterways Program, registration fees for rental dwelling units that are subject to the state's lead risk reduction program, mine lands, coal combustion byproducts, and it is extensive. So let's see. MDE representatives, let's see, Les, is there, I don't want to ask you to recite the full list, but is there any sort of overview or, particular insight into sort of the rationale of these fee changes that you'd like to emphasize for the committee?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I'll just highlight back to the 4 guiding principles we looked at. 1, where are the programs not having the resources they need to either meet their environmental protection goals, or 2, provide good customer service to those that need permits or in the regulated community. Number 2, we looked at where were there deficits running in programs, particularly those that had to be backfilled by general funds. 3, we looked at the economic growth issues and making sure we weren't causing harm to the economy in this. And we also looked at making the responsible party pay. So if you're getting a benefit or you're causing a problem we have to deal with, that should be the party that pays. And that's kind of what guided us in choosing these particular fees. We had a lot more potential ones to include, and we really narrowed it down.
Unless, is it fair to say that almost all, if not all, of these fees haven't been adjusted for a while?
Yes, and some of them decades, some of them a decade. And a couple we needed to change due to outside factors like the EPA telling us we needed to increase our fees for the air emission permits.
Okay. Thanks. And I do want to say a couple of hands up before calling Delegate Love and Delegate Terraza. I do want to say that, again, we just wanted to discuss this bill. If there's any particular program or, for which there's a fee change that any member would like to get more information on, feel free to mention that, and we'd ask, we could make that request of Les to get more information about it. So, but with that, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Les, can you tell me a little bit more about, it's the second to last bullet point on page 2 of the fiscal note, increases registration fees for rental dwelling units paid by owners of affected property. I want to make sure that that isn't passed down to the renters. So if you could just describe that a little bit more to me, that would be helpful.
Certainly. So that's the rental property lead registration fee. That is collected from owners of rental properties on currently a yearly basis. It is $30 per year. And that is the primary funding mechanism for MDE's lead poisoning prevention program. And that fee has not been adjusted in 10 years. And when it comes into the program, that's what allows us to do the testing and inspections where there are potential lead poisoning cases. And as EPA has lowered that threshold level of what is acceptable for lead exposure, particularly for children, we have had our caseloads increase dramatically over the last couple of years. And we had a $4 million shortfall in FY 2023, and we're still looking at caseloads to increase from their 2020 level, probably by 3 to 4 times by 2024, based on the current EPA levels.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So Les, these are properties that when it says affected properties, these are properties that have lead in them? Am I reading that right?
That is correct. So any property where lead is found, typically it's in paint, must register as a property. Now, in some instances, if you go and completely remove the lead, which in many instances is very costly, then you're not affected by this because you're then lead free. But any property that does have lead paint that is typically protected, sealed up, then they have to pay this annual registration fee.
Got it. Thank you.
And I'll just add that the affected property is pre-1978 rental housing.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Les and Kristen, remind me, this pays, among other things, for testing for these properties. Whenever there's a changeover in tenancy, among other things, MDE does a testing for compliance.
The property owner would do the risk reduction, and then I believe they get inspections from I'll have to look at the lead law again, that the inspection, I know they get an inspection from an independent, I believe, and inspector, but I have to look back at the law.
Okay.
I believe that's correct. Where we come in specifically is when there's a instance of lead poisoning or an allegation of lead poisoning. That's when we come in to do the testing and the investigation to determine the source. And obviously, if there is a detectable lead found, deal with the issue of the affected party.
Okay. Great. Delegate Terraza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with Delegate Love's, where I guess I share her concerns about that being passed along to tenants. And I apologize if you already answered this, but can this be passed on? I may just misheard that, or is there something we can do in here so that it won't be passed on to tenants?
Well, the fee, like any fee, this one goes to the landlord in particular, and the landlord could certainly set their rental rates to reflect whatever charges that they may have or feel is appropriate. So in some cases, this may not be passed on to the tenant, and others it could be. It's a case-by-case basis. And that would have to be, I mean, with any fee on any business, costs can get passed on.
So, okay, so, and can you remind me how much the fee is changing?
So the fee is changing from $30 a year per rental unit to $60 a year per rental unit. We're also, and this will generate about 2.8 million in additional annual revenue, bringing the program closer back to parity, just to be sustainable, not any addition. This is not a revenue generator from what the program is costing. But we are also going to change it to be collected every other year. So it would be $120 every other year rather than you have to pay $60 every year. So there's a small administrative savings there, both for us and for the landlords who would have to pay this fee.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, just sort of for discussion purposes, that
Sure.
I do think they need money to inspect this, but it does concern me that we don't have, or we aren't doing here, or we don't have the ability to keep that from being passed along. That I'm still concerned about that. But if I could ask a question on another topic, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. This came up in the hearing, and that is that you guys don't seem to be touching, what I asked about was stream restoration, and stream restoration's exempt from the fee under this. This is on page 14. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that more closely, but I have a proposed amendment to remove stream restoration out of that.
Delegate Terraza, could you remind me where that is? Did you say again, page 14?
Yeah, it's page 14, line 17. I mean, there's also something in the title, but yeah,
Oh, I see. Okay.
And just to remove the word stream restoration. Because I guess part of our discussion, a lot of us have been having discussions, but not, I guess, as a committee yet this year, about stream restorations and the need for more oversight from MDE. And I'm wondering if having that fee reinstated would be helpful to fund some of that oversight.
Les, do you want to comment on that? I mean, we're not going to officially vote on any amendments tonight, but Les, do you have any feedback on that thought or want to get back to us?
I will certainly take that back. I think we can certainly consider that. I do think there's a lot, as with many things with stream restoration, it's complicated. There could be some other unanticipated results from adding and bringing them back into the fee. So I will check with our WSA and get back to you on that.
That would be great. And if you could also tell us what that fee would be. I guess I'm not sure, just in reading through this, exactly what that fee would be that is being waived, how much that is.
I will get back to you with that. It's
Great.
dependent typically on the size and scope of the project. So I really will have to check on stream restorations because they're typically fairly significant in size.
Great, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you, Les. Delga Terraza, any other question?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Delga Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to rents, the rental, the land use fee for
Sure.
a second. So just so I'm clear on what we're talking about here. Les, you said it goes from $30 to $60. Is that correct?
Yes,
So the increase is just $30.
it's a $30 increase, correct, per year.
Right. Per year. And I know that the 2 years, I understand that it's, that it goes over the 2 years, but basically for purpose, so it's $30. Do you know, so that fee's being assessed now at $30, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do we know if that's currently being passed on to the renters, or do we have any information on that? Or maybe we, maybe you don't know. Maybe there's some way we can find out. I mean, my feeling on this is that, we're talking about a $30 per year increase, which, for some people matters. But I also wonder if it's already being passed on or if it's not being passed on. And maybe we could do a little research on that. I don't know if you have that information, or maybe somebody, maybe there's no way to find it out, but it would be interesting to know.
I do not have any direct information on that. I know the argument was made by some of the landlord representatives that it would be passed on. I'm assuming potentially that is now, as with most businesses, they will attempt to pass on. So that is something that perhaps they could answer. I don't think MD has any data there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I will say, if there's anyone else on the call who has any information on that they want to pass that on to us now, or for the next meeting, that certainly would be fine. Okay, let's see. Any other hands up? Okay, Les, one question I've got is, remind me if there are any new program activities, new activities in the private sector that are subject to fees under this bill that weren't previously. So is there anything new?
So the one, let me make absolutely sure here, flipping through, but I think the only new one would be the dam safety, so that we are there creating a new registration fee annually for the dams, and that applies to any non-federally owned dam. So that means that the state would pay for their dams they own, which DNR and MDOT, counties and municipalities that own dams would pay. And we have raised that issue through MACO and MML. And private dams. And so that's a new fee entirely. And then we are adding to an existing fee, for the permit that we already issue, which we're currently doing for free for a construction or repair or modification to a dam, that permit will now get a fee attached to it. And again, those monies go into a new fund to help subsidize private dam repairs, which is a major issue in the state. And the General Assembly, and specifically last year, Budget and Tax requested we come up with some way to try to address this. So this is our response to that request.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Love?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's exactly where I was going with my question, was to this whole private dam registration piece. And I'm curious about it because we heard some testimony that, people buy a property, they don't even know they have a dam on it. I'm thinking about a tour that the that the majority, that Speaker Pro Tem, good heavens, that the subcommittee chair, Delegate Dana Stein, I'm all over the map, and I went on, where there had been a lot of restoration work, and we saw some beavers coming back and putting up a dam. So would that have to be registered? How would this work?
So we do not regulate dams made by beavers. So
Okay.
that's obviously just
And I didn't mean that as a joke. It's kind of funny, but I just wanted to make sure that wouldn't be swept up into this.
No, and even if it was, it would be quite interesting how we would figure out how to collect money from said beavers, if they would pay in wood chips or some similar currency.
Okay, and for those folks that don't know they have a dam on their property that they're buying?
So right now, we're talking about dams that have to meet the state definition of being a dam and be registered. So people do have a means of checking. Somebody, I guess, could illegally build a new dam without adding it, but that would likely be noticed at some point. Not every dam on a pond or a simple berm constitutes a dam under state law to be regulations to be registered. But the law is fairly clear in identifying who could be responsible. So if you're a homeowner adjacent to a pond, the law says you should check and see if you might have an ownership of a dam. It can often be a homeowners association, and how records there might get lost. But that's the responsible party. And when these dams come under disrepair legally, those are the ones who are identified to be liable. And in some instances, you have the capacity to do those repairs ranges greatly. And if it's just a few people, and in particular, maybe a single homeowner that might not have even been aware, hey, the dam's on my property, technically, I am responsible, might not have the capacity to pay for that, or a homeowners association. So this is why we acknowledge, particularly at the lower end where there may be groups struggling to pay, having this mechanism in place to say, hey, this money will be available.
Thank you. A follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. And what mechanism, or has MDE thought about how it's going to do outreach to people to let them know they have to register these dams?
So most of the dams should be registered at this point in terms of, like, you could, I guess, construct a new dam off the grid, but given the size and scope of that construction, somebody's likely going to notice. So there aren't too many dams that should be registered that are not, that dams that are, off the books, so to speak, that should not be. So we know those registrations, we know the owners have been identified there. So for the most part, they can be communicated with. The outreach will occur through our dam safety program that already manages permitting and keeping track of this registry.
But now I'm confused. You said this is creating this is creating the registration requirement. And then you just said some of them
It's
have already
creating the
registered.
fee for the registration requirement. The registration requirement already exists. We have a dam registry with, I think it's about, I want to say 557 active dams in the state's dam. The state has a dam inventory. So these are already on our books. We know about them. They can be owned at the state level, local level, or be private. And so we're applying a registration fee to these dams as a way to raise money to assist with the repair of the privately owned dams. And why everybody is paying, except the federal government, of course, is that when these dams fail or the private owners are unable to pay, it typically falls on a county, a municipality, or the state to do the repairs.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Terraza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Speaker Pro Tem. I'm a little confused about this dam issue, and I just want to make sure I understand. When you say private dams, are those on like individual property owners, or this is like a privately owned by like a business or something? I guess I'm just confused about that. This is new to me.
Sure. So there's again about 557 active dams in the state's dam registry. These can be owned by the state, local governments, counties and municipalities, or individuals or companies. So they range from a certain very large energy company that has a dam in the northern part of the state, all the way down to an individual single homeowner that actually owns what constitutes a dam on maybe a large pond or a small lake. And so it ranges. One of your former delegates, Delegate Lukey, is actually a private dam owner, as I found out when we brought this bill through his office. But some it's homeowners associations, some of it are companies, businesses. It really depends.
Great, thank you. Just was curious. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't know the extent of, dams throughout the state and how a homeowner can have one on their property. I guess, yeah, anyway, it's interesting. Okay. Other questions? Yes, I do have another one, and I guess I really should know the answer to this, but the Clean Air Fund, the activities, they're subject to the Clean Air Fund, identifying, monitoring, and regulating air pollution in the state. Are those types of activities, I guess it's both complaint driven as well as some facilities require regular monitoring of compliance with air pollution limits. So is that both types of activities?
So yes, when you're for air emission permits, and this is under Title V of the Clean Air Act at the federal government, and they delegate our authority to us. So this is EPA's authority, federal authority given to MDE to regulate in Maryland. That covers both checking compliance, and typically when we issue a permit, they're allowed to you're allowed so much tonnage of air emissions of that regulated pollutant in a year, and that's part of your permit. And if you exceed that, either through monitoring or we get a complaint that's detected through either activity, then that's when we obviously are in violation of permit and we will step in.
Great, okay.
And as some, again, with here, this program is running a deficit, and per federal law, this program needs to be sustained by the fees that we collect. It has not been, so we've been running a deficit of about 2.2 million. in recent years that has had to be made up, and EPA has now noted this to us, and their next step will typically be potentially to just take back the delegation, meaning all these air emission permits will then be managed at the federal level.
Oh, is that right? So states are required to have special funds that sustain this type of enforcement activity for them to continue have delegated authority?
Yes, and EPA could take back this, and as I've kind of learned, they don't give you much of a warning. We've kind of got our one warning, and they may do nothing, but they may take it back. That's their next step that they would do if they feel like our program is significantly underfunded or not being effective.
Okay. Okay. Other questions for Les? And remind me, Les, has the department provided any amendments? I know Delga Terraza has an amendment, which we'll discuss next week, but with respect to stream restoration activity, but does the department have any amendments?
We do. We did provide in our testimony packet a set of amendments, mostly designed to address concerns of stakeholders. And I did provide 2 small additional amendment updates to Kristen earlier this week based on resolving an outstanding concern with the county health officers and environmental health directors, and then with NIOP, which I had referenced in our testimony. We were working to reach a agreement on one of their issues, which was very minor about the dam part. We have that language submitted, which they've agreed to. Okay,
great. So at next week's meeting, we could review your amendments. Delga Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm skimming through the testimony right now, and I'm not seeing them.
It's in the back of MDE's testimony. It's on the last few pages.
Okay, that's a really long piece.
I
there it is.
attempted to
Okay.
do a reprint for you guys, but my reprint didn't work, but it'll work for
I
you.
got it. It's on page 9 starting on page 9 of their testimony. Got it. I didn't get that far. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for your discussion, discussion of House Bill 245, and next week's meeting we'll review MDE's amendments, Delga Terraza's amendments, and if there are any other amendments that the subcommittee would like us to consider. And also, Les, I guess Delga Terraza did have the question concerning if stream restoration activity wasn't exempt, is there sort of default fee that MDE would charge for those types of permits?
Yes, I will get back to you on that.
And subcommittee, remind me, was there any other item that we wanted additional information on? Okay. All right, great. Well then, Kristen, are we done? I guess we've gone through our 3 bills, approved 1 and considered 2 others. Is there anything else, Kristen, for us to do at this point?
I don't have anything for you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And first, we'll meet again next Wednesday after bill hearings. And, until we see each other on the floor tomorrow, have a good evening. And thanks to everyone who joined the call.